Alien Covenant was another brilliant dish served by Master Chef Sir Ridley.
Finally, some good
Movies. However, it is an entry that is a bit dry when it comes to characterization and really exploits Ridley's focus of having a film for a strict 2-hour cut for the past few years now. This is an attempt to make the film a bit more nuanced, even though the theatrical cut is quite good, especially in comparison to Prometheus's theatrical version, which left out a ton of great material. This is Alien Covenant, my own cut. The extended Waylon David prologue. When it comes to the opening, I thought about keeping the theatrical version. David talking about why he chose the gods of Valhalla is a little bit too expository. Audience members already cultured in operas will know the subtext and meaning. Also, the general feeling isn't very optimistic, but rather malevolent from David. Why would Wayland, after hearing what his baleful cyborg has to say about creation and gods, take him on a trip later in their lives on the Prometheus? Because even if he doesn't seem like a loyal individual due to his viewpoints, David will indeed serve his dad, T, and later go about the secret mission of his father because he is indeed faithful. It's a good enough tug-of-war power struggle for Wayland to go along with, considering David is his perfect son that does not fail him, unlike his daughter. There's obviously lots of layers here, and the extended opening really does help the narrative of David going from servant to God, so I will be keeping. Walter in the garden, Orm talks to Daniels, and Walter gives Daniels weed. These deleted scenes are not going to be included. These are all clips for a sequence of Daniels grieving. Most of the cutting room floor ones are very meh and don't do anything that the theatrical doesn't already. Cry it out is something a non-married man says, not an inept leader. Walter gives Daniels weed hits the floor because there's no reason to double up on Walter and Daniels coalescing when you already have a scene of Daniels crying in the terraforming bay with him, which is much more impactful and powerful and gives a payoff to the finale when Daniels goes to sleep. The weed has to go. However, the final one in that deleted sequence, the Daniels bedroom flashback, is quite good because it really drives home the cabin narrative. The audience sees it play out rather than is told, like in the theatrical when Daniels tells Walter about her original plans of colonizing with her husband and building a cabin on the lake. This bedroom flashback ended up on the cutting room floor because it's slightly redundant. You already have Walter's Daniels conversation, and the tablet scene exists because she needs to pick up her cross, so to speak, and wear the nail as a subliminal crucifix. The scene's last purpose is a story beat for her to physically get up and move forward, like her husband tells her to via the tablet. But I want to drive home the cabin plot to the audience, as well as show her relationship with her husband more than once. I placed this deleted scene in after her husband is bagged up. The beginning of the scene is a bit rough because it shows the establishing shot of her crying, and that's a bit short for my tastes to put in, but the edit flows very well at the end, having Jacob look at the blueprints, and then it cuts to the present timeline of Daniel's point of view of the bedspread of photos of the cabin.
It's coffee. Okay. It's snowing.
You are the most indecisive man I have ever met.
Oh, yeah? The chimneys are important.
Beautiful, beautiful cinema. There's a bit of redundancy, but it's worth it. Later, when Daniels is with Walter, the scene is far more impactful for the audience when she cries with him. I will be adding back in Orm looking at a picture of a church and Jacob's extended funeral. This is important because it gives Orm more purpose as to why he's on this journey and wants to spread the love of God to a new colony. What the hell is a few more seconds to get to know these people a bit more? I'm aware it's an alien movie, people are going to die, but make their deaths at least semi-impactful. Also, this deleted footage later includes Daniel stating that the ship is full of couples, which is fully exposed in the trailer, but is not included really anywhere in the film. And it isn't very obvious. In particular, the gay couple was rather subtle, not as frontal as it could have been. Blink and you miss it. Add in an extended view by putting this footage back in. The extended Ludward's Fault. I really like this because it makes Corrine more nurturing and loving as a person, and it's a very small deleted scene. I want to keep, even though you're not really supposed to because of duplication. There are 2 let's get up and go scenes in a row. And you can't have the exact same scene back to back, you have to pick one. So this one hit the cutting room floor. However, I really like the pacing, how it goes from Hallett back to Kareen to Tennessee and back to Kareen. It feels more natural even if it's redundant. I'm keeping it. The extended crossing the plaza. This is something that is not 100% necessary. Also, why would they stop and pause to look at something when they're running away from a threat? However, I really love the aesthetics. It really puts me more into the location than the theatrical cut, in which the cinematography of that version I could care less for. Having Lope show the ships adds more fuel for the group wanting to know what the hell is going on. So I'm keeping, even if the music for my edits is a little screwy because it repeats a cue before proceeding back into the theatrical version. Extended Daniels thanks Walter. I'm going to keep this deleted footage, aka the original version of the scene, where Walter expresses his feelings on the matter of meeting the original Wayland cyborg. This means cutting after David says, "This way," to produce the information where Daniels discloses her concerns to Walter to move the plot forward. Only slight issue is that later, when Daniels is giving Walter staples on his face, she's thanking him again, and obviously redundancy for editing and film is a huge no-no. However, in the theatrical, it is cut in a way where things flow quite nicely. In the theatrical, it's David Crew, Walter Daniels, David Crew outside, Storm Ship, David Walter Lair. In my cut, I went with David Crew, Storm Ship, David Crew outside, Walter Daniels, and David Walter Lair. This is my favorite edit I did, and the film actually feels incredible with this arrangement. Moving the genocide of the engineers by David, I am moving this flashback and mixing together the full recitation of the Shelley poem from start to finish, whilst overlaying a few shots from the Crossing short viral film during Walter's voiceover continuation. It shows David and Shaw's relationship being a friendly one, and David's story as one that's more trustworthy instead of showing off the deployment of the deadly bioweapons, leading the audience to not trust him. This is a monstrous mood change from the original version.
Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. Byron. 1818.
I moved the flashback later in the film, but first, cutting the approaching neomorph outside, because you're in on the upcoming death as an audience member. Not good. You never saw the Xeno lurking an alien anywhere before the Xeno was in the same vicinity. You only saw it on screen with a character. It was always lurking somewhere in the ship, and you didn't know exactly where. The scariest possible result for the audience. So I cut this neomorph out. The extended Rosenthal Prayer. First of all, here's a low-key strong character. She kills a neomorph and survives an attack from a second one. This extended footage of Rosie expands upon her character, even if it seems random that she's praying in Hebrew, despite her Star of David necklace being visible in this scene and the first act. I wish they would have had her pray maybe earlier in the lander when the turbulence was hectic to establish her character as possibly religious. Or makes sense as a believer because in his opening speech he talks about it and it's alluded to throughout his plotline. But with Rosenthal, this prayer seems a bit out of place. I'm still going to keep it, however. Covenant featured a lot of religious tones that ended up deleted, like Orm telling David he had a dream of meeting God before the chest burster explodes from within him. Covenant also externalizes its theme of careful what you wish for when it comes to faith. Orm has too much of it in others, and it becomes his downfall. Rosenthal prays to her Jewish deity and perishes, and Daniels wants to build a cabin on the lake, but she does not. So this Rosie prayer plays into that sub-narrative. I'm keeping the preceding hallway shot as an answer visually to her prayers, in which the audience can deduce is the remaining neomorph. But I'm not including the shot of the neomorph as well as the sound effects of the animal from the hallway because it leads the audience too much in. Walter reporting back to Orm. I am keeping this. After learning about what Walter had to say about David, Orm's convictions are now doubled thanks to Walter's presumptions, as he stands in front of David with a dead neomorph and Rosenthal. Putting this scene back in strengthens Orm's assumptions about David. Adding back in the extended stairs to the egg room scene. This is crucial and should not have been cut, as it gives Orm a small reason to trust David. He trusted him earlier when David saved all of their lives, but Orm needs more proof before proceeding with David further after he was just with a neomorph trying to make it his pet. There's a wonderful duality of this quick scene because usually horrible smells forebode something horrible, like a dead body, and also plays into the character flaw of Orm having too much faith in people. I do remove the line from David about key ingredients because it's a little too foreboding. Now, the engineer genocide scene. I moved this after the birth of the xenomorph, the discovery of Shaw's dead body by Walter, and placing it right as Walter confronts David. I feel like this placement was its original location in the story and is a lot more shocking as it reveals David's agenda in full. The theatrical placement was just fine, but I feel like this is better. I adore the duplication echo of "look at my works, eat my tea" at the end of the theatrical version, but in this, I overlay the "I was not meant to serve, neither were you" from the preceding scene, and it is just as powerful.
I was not made to serve. Neither were you. Why are you on a colonization mission, Walter?
Beautiful film. David reaching for the knife against Walter. This is a lose-lose situation. If you delete it, I could see test audiences going, "Oh, well, how did he kill him?" And then the other half, if you include it, "Oh, I saw that coming from a mile away." Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I will be choosing damned if you don't here and cut the reaching of the knife. And I want to add in a short version of the viral film The Last Supper as a flashback right after Daniels staples Walter's face. As a short film, Supper isn't very good and is actually quite boring in its entirety, but this footage adds more characterization to a few crewmates. I've cut it down to Jacob saying goodnight, Daniels winking at her husband, a joke of Tennessee's, and showing off the relationship of Hallett and Loeb. I thought of having this before Daniels and Tennessee's bond was a good idea. The theatrical moves a bit fast into the next sequence, and there needs to be kind of a nice breather, even if it's a little bit useless for the plot itself outside of Daniels reminiscing about her absent crew. After this newly included footage, it goes into the photo and Daniels cooking up food, which I thought was a very good transition, even if my Covenant movie edit is flashback heavy, and the beginning of this scene is a bit jarring. You can be the judge.
I just wanted to say hey before I jet out. I'm feeling kind of queasy.
Oh, I thought we were going to have one more drink before we went into cryo sleep. Who's going to lead us in our toast?
Just have Danny do something. She know what to say.
Colonize all over this table right now.
I'm removing the establishing shot of Walter watching the screens before Daniels wakes up. I'm moving these images to cover the one of Walter smirking at the TV screen, seeing a distressed Daniels in Tennessee. This is to remove any notion that Walter/David set up the whole ordeal. However, in the theatrical, it's paced very well between seeing the table, Walter, then seeing Daniels, and it seems a bit too quick in my version. However, spacing out the sequence with the Last Supper short does help a bit.
Attention. Captain Daniels, please report to the med bay. Attention. Captain Daniels.
I thought about removing the Ricks and Upworth's death scene. I kind of just want to have them showering and then cut away after the Xeno shows up in the shadows. It's far too much on the nose 80s slasher trope malarkey. Like, why keep adding to the stigma? However, it's a bit awkward without it, and it's too fast of a pace for Danny and Tennessee to run over to rescue them, but not be there in time. So, it stays. I wanted to discuss this viral ad campaign film called She Won't Go Quietly. Why on earth is there extended footage and or scenes of Daniels hunting a xenomorph, and none of it is in the film or deleted footage? This was the film I signed up for. What we got wasn't as spectacular. There has to be some reason to omit this, because I don't think they would spend money to produce an exclusive ad to appease to young adults with an alternative pop song playing that would have cost thousands of dollars to produce. There's just not enough footage to include as a scene in the final cut of the story, unfortunately. It's a bit of a waste of resources by Fox. I digress. I thought about removing Daniels learning that Walter is not Walter, but David, I was going to have the switch for the audience be at the security clearance door with Walter instead of Daniels discovering it in her pod. I think the scene in the theatrical is a bit too dark, and I think it's more frightening if she wakes up and discovers David has taken over Origai 6 with a made-up army full of xenomorphs. Apparently, without my knowledge, this is how the film was edited in the early versions of the story, and is how the ending plays out in the novelization. Hooray for validation and confirmation bias! Daniels might not return for the next Alien film because there seems to be no human character continuity when it comes to the franchise. However, her discovery in the theatrical is frightening because of Waterston's acting, and I do like how the theatrical closes the loop of the log cabin motif from earlier. Very tough decision, but I'm going to keep the theatrical instead of my work print splice. I like it slightly better, but here it is for your viewing pleasure anyway.
Sleep well. My post-credits include viral material, just like my Prometheus fan edit, making it a quasi-eulogy and giving off a super eerie tone. These include the Meet Walter video, as well as a slimmed-down version of Phobos, and a shorter David's Advent, talking about how he found his queen. Advent was incredible and deserved a post-credit placement. My post-credit extras are quite long at 16:46, but my actual film changes are only 5 minutes longer of a runtime for the film. Alien Covenant theatrical cut runtime 2:02:35. Alien Covenant my own cut runtime 2:24:06. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Godspeed.